I took care of my nephew Ben from the time he was a small child. I gave up my personal dreams, worked extra shifts at the hospital, and even sold my family house to fund his law school education. But the day I shared with him that I had to retire early, he handed me a suitcase. He said I had just 48 hours to leave his home, calling me a financial burden he could no longer manage. What he didn't know was that my last patient, a private billionaire I had looked after for more than 15 years, had secretly left me $12 million in her will. I was about to show my ungrateful nephew what betrayal really costs. Before we continue with the story, tell us where you are watching from, and if this story touches you, please subscribe, because I have saved something truly special for you tomorrow. My name is Brooklyn Wright. I am 65 years old, and until recently I was the head nurse at Westlake Memorial's long-term care unit. The picture in my wallet is from 1978. I am 20 years old holding my sister's toddler, Ben. She had left him with me just for the weekend. That weekend turned into a lifetime. My sister disappeared into addiction and never came back. That little boy with chocolate on his face became my whole world. I was barely an adult myself, fresh out of nursing school, with student loans piling up. But watching him cry himself to sleep that first night, I knew I couldn't leave him too. So I chose him again and again over everything else. I turned down a research fellowship at Johns Hopkins. I gave up my dream to work with Doctors Without Borders. My engagement to Thomas, who could not accept raising another woman's child, ended with a returned ring and a tearful letter. But every sacrifice felt worth it when Ben took his first steps towards me, or proudly showed me a perfect report card calling me Auntie L, with a gap-toothed smile. I worked difficult night shifts, so I could go to his school events during the day. I took holiday shifts for double pay to buy his baseball gear and summer camps. When he showed academic promise, I made the hardest choice, yet selling my parents' farmhouse, the only thing I inherited to pay for Whitmore's expensive tuition. You are going to be someone great, I would whisper, tucking him in at night, my uniform still smelling of hospital cleaner. And I will be right there cheering you on. In time, Ben did become someone. He was the top student in his class, earned a partial scholarship to Princeton, then decided he wanted to go to Harvard Law. The scholarships were not enough, so I used my small retirement fund for his living costs. It will be worth it, I told myself. Ben would take care of me when I got older. He had promised this at his graduation, tears in his eyes as he hugged me. Everything I am is because of you, Aunt Ella, he had said, holding my hand tightly. When I am settled, you will never worry about anything again. For a while, it seemed like he meant it. After he married Stella, a state senator's daughter, they insisted I sell my apartment and move into their small guest house in Oak Ridge Heights. Stop working so hard, Ben had said. Live with us. Save your money. When you retire, we will handle everything. Still, I kept my nursing job partly for my own independence, partly because I truly loved it. Over the years, I had specialized in caring for wealthy elderly patients who needed special attention. My last patient was Brooklyn Blackwell. We shared a first name which she found amusing, a lonely billionaire who had outlived her whole family. For 15 years, I was her main nurse and eventually her friend. We played chess on Sundays, talked about books, and shared private thoughts. Brooklyn, she told me once, you are the only person who sees me as a human being, not just money with a heartbeat. I didn't think much of the comment. I treated all my patients with the same care. What I did not know was that Mrs. Blackwell had been watching me all those years, listening to my stories about raising Ben, noticing how dedicated I was to both him and my patients. When she passed away peacefully last spring, I was very sad. At her funeral, which very few people attended, more lawyers than mourners, I stood in the back, just another healthcare worker, paying respects. 2 weeks later, Westlake Memorial announced budget cuts. After 45 years of working there, I was being forced to retire early, with a payment that would barely cover 6 months of bills. The administration called it an opportunity, but we both knew what it really was. That evening, I drove home with shaking hands, practicing how I would tell Ben. I had no money saved after supporting him all those years. But we were family. He was a successful lawyer now, married into wealth. The guest house was already my home. This would be okay. I found them in their fancy kitchen drinking wine while their housekeeper made dinner. Their teenage twin children were at boarding school in Switzerland, a choice I had always thought was cold. "Ben, I need to talk to you." I started sitting on a clean bar stool. "The hospital is cutting staff. They are making me retire early." The silence that followed made me feel cold. Ben and Stella looked at each other in a way I could not understand. "When?" Ben asked flatly. "By the end of the month. The payment won't last long, and my pension will be smaller since I am leaving early." I forced a smile. "But maybe it is a good thing. I could help more around here, do some volunteer work." Stella put down her wine glass with a loud sound. "Ben, we should talk about this in private." "No need," Ben replied. "Aunt Elle, this is bad timing. We have been meaning to talk to you about the guest house." My stomach tightened. "What about the guest house?" "We are turning it into a home office now that I am becoming a partner at my firm. The drive to work is too long, and with the twins coming home for summer, we need the extra room." I struggled to understand his words. "Oh, so you mean we need you to find your own place?" Stella added in a businesslike way. "We have been helping with your living costs while you insisted on keeping that job. We thought you were saving for your own home." Saving on a nurse's salary that mostly went to medical bills not covered by insurance taxes and occasional gifts for grandnephews who barely paid attention to me. "But where would I go?" I asked, my voice small. "I do not have money for a down payment, and rent here is extremely high." Ben cleared his throat, pulling out his phone. "There is a senior living place 40 minutes away. It is very affordable. They even have a program where you can help in their medical office to lower the costs." I looked at this tall, good-looking man I had raised from a toddler. "You want me to live in a retirement home at 65 and work as an underpaid assistant after being head of long-term care? It is a perfectly reasonable solution," Stella said coldly. "Many people your age would be thankful." Ben nodded. "You have always been practical, Aunt Elle. Financially, you have become a burden we simply cannot support, especially with the twins' school fees and our plans for fixing up the house. A burden. 45 years of love and sacrifice reduced to a negative number in their accounts." "How long do I have?" I asked, surprised my voice was steady. Ben looked uncomfortable. "The builders start on Monday, so 2 days. I can help you pack." My world fell apart in that perfect kitchen. But as I looked at my nephew, the man I had given everything to raise, something inside me became hard with resolve. "I see," I said, standing up. "Then I should start packing." Walking back to the guest house, tears blurred my sight, but my mind was surprisingly clear. I remembered Mrs. Blackwell's words. "Brooklyn never let anyone make you feel small. The world is full of people who will try to lessen you, especially when they owe you the most." I had no idea that in just 3 days, I would get a call that would change everything, a call from Mrs. Blackwell's lawyer. And Ben had no idea that the financial burden he was throwing away was about to become richer than he could ever imagine. I spent that night going through 40 years of memories, deciding what little I could take with me. My hands shook as I folded the blanket Ben and I had made together for a school project when he was 10. Into a small box went the seashell collection from our trips to Cape May, where I had worked extra shifts at a clinic by the beach to afford the 2 nights in a cheap motel once each summer. I wrapped his law school graduation photo, the one where he is hugging me tightly, in soft paper, paused, then put it back on the shelf. Some memories were too painful to carry forward. By morning, I had filled just 2 suitcases and 3 small boxes. 45 years of life condensed into what would fit in the trunk of my old car. The guest house, my home for 15 years, suddenly felt strange, as if it had already rejected me. I was labeling the last box when a sharp knock stopped my thoughts. I opened the door to see Stella perfectly dressed in expensive workout clothes, coffee mug in hand. "Brooklyn, I wanted to check if you needed any help." Her eyes looked over my few belongings with a critical gaze. "Ben said the senior place has furnished rooms, so do not bother with any large items." "I know," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. "Most of my things will stay." She nodded, seeming relieved. "Good. We have scheduled the builders to begin tearing down the guest house Monday morning at 8:00. Ben has arranged for a moving service to take anything left to donate. Tearing down, not fixing up. They could not wait to remove any sign of my being here. "The twins are coming home for a long weekend," she continued. "We would prefer if you were settled somewhere else before they arrive. No need for awkward goodbyes. No need to explain to their children why they were making their great-aunt leave." Stella checked her watch, making it clear our talk was just another task on her list. "Ben set up a meeting for you at Oak Ridge Senior Living for this afternoon. The director is expecting you at 2:00. They are doing you a favor by speeding up the paperwork." A favor? As if forcing me into a retirement home was an act of kindness. I have already made other plans. I lied, surprising myself. Stella's perfectly shaped eyebrows lifted. "Oh, with whom?" "A former co-worker," I said vaguely. "I will be staying with her until I find something permanent." It was the first time I had ever lied to them, and something about Stella's brief confusion gave me a little satisfaction. She recovered quickly, her face becoming harder. "Well, that is for the best. Ben was worried you might not be able to afford the senior place without our help anyway." She turned to leave, then stopped. "One more thing, we will need your gate pass and house keys before you go." With that final insulting act, she walked away, her expensive shoes making no sound on the garden path. I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart pounding with a mix of sadness and anger. They were not just pushing me out. They were completely erasing me. I had absolutely nowhere to go. No former co-worker had offered a place to stay. No friend had an extra room. My small nursing salary had always gone to supporting Ben, then later to helping with bills around the property and occasional gifts for the twins. I had been so sure of Ben's promises that I had never built any savings for myself. At 65, I was facing homelessness with less than 2 months' worth of living expenses in my bank account. The pension I would receive would barely cover rent for a small apartment in the cheapest area of town, let alone food and healthcare. The panic I had been holding back threatened to overwhelm me. I grabbed my phone and started looking for hotels for long stays, anything to give me a few weeks to figure out what to do next. Everything was terribly expensive. I looked further away at neighborhoods I would never consider normally. Finally, I found a motel with weekly rates on the edge of the city. The reviews mentioned cockroaches and strange stains, but it was all I could afford. With shaking fingers, I booked a room for 2 weeks, the most my money would allow. Then I called a car service to take me to the bank. I needed to take out my small savings before Ben somehow convinced the bank it should go towards his renovation. The teller at First National looked concerned when I asked to close my account. "Are you sure, Miss Wright?" "You have been with us for over 30 years. "I am sure," I said, forcing a smile. "I am moving." She finished the paperwork, then counted out $4,235 in cash, all that was left of my life's work. I stared at the small stack of bills, remembering how I had once withdrawn almost 10 times that amount to help with Ben's first semester at Harvard Law. The money had come from years of holiday shifts and overtime gone in a single transaction. He had promised to pay me back someday. As I left the bank, my phone vibrated with a text from Ben. "Confirmed your appointment at Oak Ridge Senior Living. We will drop you off at 1:30. Be ready." I did not reply. Instead, I directed my driver to a coffee shop downtown. I could not bear to return to the guest house yet to face Ben and his efficient dismantling of my life. The cafe was quiet, just a few people with laptops and an old couple sharing a pastry. I ordered a small coffee, now very aware of every dollar, and took a seat by the window watching people pass by. Everyone seemed to have a purpose, a place to go. I had neither. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of my situation. I had given my whole adult life to Ben, sacrificed every dream, every relationship, every bit of financial safety. And now, when I needed him most, he had discarded me without thinking twice. Worse, he had made me feel like an inconvenience, a burden he had been generous to put up with for so long. My coffee grew cold as I sat there trapped in a cycle of regret and worry. What would happen when my motel money ran out? What if I got sick? Medicare would not cover everything, and I had no savings for emergencies. My phone vibrated again, this time with a number I did not know. Probably another spam call about my car's warranty. I almost did not answer it, but something made me pick up. "Is this Brooklyn Wright?" a deep male voice asked. "Yes, who is calling?" "My name is Michael Goldstein. I am the person in charge of Brooklyn Blackwell's estate. I have been trying to reach you for several days." My heart skipped a beat. "I am sorry, I have been busy. Is there a problem with Mrs. Blackwell's things?" I had kept a small pin she had insisted I take to remember her by. Perhaps the family wanted it back. "No, nothing like that. I need to meet with you about Mrs. Blackwell's will. You are named as someone who will receive something." I almost dropped the phone. "Receive something?" There must be a mistake. Mrs. Blackwell had no family, but surely there were charities. "There is no mistake, Miss Wright. Mrs. Blackwell was very clear. Could you come to my office tomorrow morning? It is quite urgent that we complete the paperwork." I agreed, my mind racing. Perhaps she had left me a small gift, a book from her collection, or maybe a small amount of money to remember her. It was a kindness I had not expected, but it would not change my basic situation. That afternoon, I went back to the guest house to find Ben waiting, car keys in hand, looking impatient. "You did not answer my text," he said. "We need to leave for the senior center in 20 minutes. I took a deep breath. "I am not going to the senior center, Ben." His forehead furrowed. "What do you mean you are not going? We had an agreement." "No, you had a plan. I never agreed to it." Ben sighed dramatically, as if dealing with a difficult child. "Aunt Elle, be reasonable. You have nowhere else to go, no income, and no job prospects at your age. This is the best choice. I have an appointment tomorrow morning," I said, ignoring his comment about my age, "with the person in charge of Mrs. Blackwell's estate. Apparently, I am named in her will." Ben's expression changed instantly from annoyance to strong interest. "Named? What did she leave you?" "I do not know yet. Probably just something to keep." but it could be money. The clear hope in his voice made my stomach turn. She was worth billions, was not she? I shrugged suddenly, not wanting to share anything more with him. I will know tomorrow. Ben's mind was clearly calculating, rethinking things. Well, this changes things. Why do not we postpone the senior center visit? You should stay here until we know what is happening with the will. No, I said firmly. I have made other plans. But that is not needed now. He insisted, his tone softening to the one he used in court when trying to appear fair. Family should stick together during changes like this. Stella and I are just trying to help you plan for your future. My future. The one they decided included cleaning bedpans for a place to stay just hours ago. My plans are already confirmed, I said. I will be leaving tonight. Tonight. Ben looked truly surprised. But the builders do not start until Monday. You have the weekend. I prefer to go now. Ben ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, visibly adjusting his thinking. At least let me drive you. Where are you staying? With a co-worker, Stella mentioned. I have called a car service. I lied again. Thank you for your concern. He stared at me, confusion slowly turning into suspicion. In 15 years of living in their guest house, I had never once gone against them, never questioned their decisions or refused their help. Now the mere hint of receiving something had him scrambling to understand who this new version of his aunt might be. Well, keep me updated about the will, he finally said. I can come with you to the meeting if you want. Legal documents can be confusing, and I am a lawyer. I will manage. I replied, turning away to continue packing. Ben stayed for a moment longer, then left, closing the door firmly behind him. I breathed out slowly, my hands shaking slightly. For the first time in decades, I had stood my ground with him. It felt frightening and exciting all at once. That night, I quietly loaded my few things into a car service while Ben and Stella were out at a fancy party. The driver helped me with my boxes, looking confused at the small amount of luggage for someone clearly moving out of such a big property. Just downsizing, I explained with a forced smile, not mentioning the cockroach-infested motel that awaited me. As we drove through the security gate one last time, I gave my pass to the guard, Tony, who had always greeted me kindly over the years. Moving out, Miss Wright? He asked, surprise clear in his voice. Yes, time for a change, I said, unable to admit the humiliating truth. Tony frowned. Mr. Ben did not mention anything about it. Should I call the house to check? That will not be necessary, I replied, gathering what dignity I could. They are expecting me to leave. The guard's expression said a lot, but he simply nodded and took my pass. Take care of yourself, Miss Wright. You deserve good things. As the car drove away, I did not look back at the property that had been my home. Instead, I focused on tomorrow's meeting. Whatever Mrs. Blackwell had left me, even if just a valued book or small item, it would be a sign of real affection from someone who had truly seen me. In that moment, it meant more than the mansion disappearing in the rearview mirror ever had. The Starlight Motor Lodge looked even worse in person than in the pictures online. The neon sign flickered unevenly, several letters dark. The parking lot was cracked and covered in cigarette butts, and a group of men stood near the ice machine watching me as my car service pulled up to the office. Lady, you sure this is the right place? My driver asked, worry on his face. I nodded, trying to hide my own fear. Yes, thank you. He hesitated. Look, I do not want to interfere, but this is not a safe area, especially for someone, well, someone like you. Someone old, someone vulnerable, someone who clearly did not belong here. I forced a smile. "It is just temporary," I assured him. "I will be fine." He insisted on helping with my bags and waiting until I checked in. The motel clerk, a young man with red eyes who barely looked up from his phone, handed me a key attached to a plastic tag, so old the room number had faded. "Weekly rate is due up front," he mumbled. "No refunds, no exceptions." I handed over nearly half of my remaining cash, trying not to think about how quickly the rest would disappear. My room was on the second floor, reached only by a rusty outdoor staircase. The driver carried my suitcases up, looking more and more uncomfortable. "Ma'am, I have daughters about your age. I cannot leave you here in good conscience." "That is very kind, but I will be fine," I repeated, though my voice lacked conviction. "I have an important meeting tomorrow that might make my situation better." He reluctantly left after I promised I would call for a ride first thing in the morning. Inside the room, I stood still, taking in my new reality. The carpet was stained beyond repair, the bedspread thin and faded. A constant drip sounded from the bathroom, and the clear smell of mildew filled the air. I sat carefully on the edge of the bed, which sank under even my light weight. Through the thin walls, I could hear a couple arguing loudly in the next room. Somewhere down the hall, a baby was crying. This was what 45 years of dedication had earned me. This was what Ben considered an acceptable future for the woman who had raised him, who had sacrificed everything for his success. A cockroach scuttled across the floor, disappearing under the dresser. I pulled my feet up onto the bed, hugging my knees to my chest. For the first time since Ben had told me I needed to leave, I allowed myself to cry, to truly cry. Silent, body-shaking sobs that seemed to come from the deepest part of me. I cried for the young woman I had been so full of dreams and ambition. I cried for the research career I had given up, the marriage I had let go of, the children I might have had. I cried for every night I had worked double shifts, for every vacation I had never taken, for every penny I had saved and then given away. Most of all, I cried because the person I had sacrificed everything for saw me as nothing more than a burden, a financial problem, to be removed when no longer useful. When I finally had no tears left, I sat in the growing darkness, listening to the symphony of sadness that surrounded me. Arguments, crying, loud music from someone's stereo. This was rock bottom. I had nowhere lower to fall. My phone buzzed with a text message. "Ben came home and found you had already left. Quite dramatic. Let me know where you are staying in case there is any news from the lawyer tomorrow." No concern for my well-being. No acknowledgement of what he had done. Just clear self-interest, thinly hidden. I did not reply. Instead, I carefully arranged my few belongings in the room, covering the stained chair with my own small blanket, placing my small clock radio on the bedside table, small attempts at dignity in a situation with no dignity. I took extra care setting out my outfit for tomorrow's meeting, my best blue dress, simple pearl earrings, and the pin Mrs. Blackwell had given me. If nothing else, I would face whatever came next with grace. Sleep did not come that night between the street noise, the uncomfortable bed, and my racing thoughts. By morning, my eyes were swollen and my back ached. But I was determined. Whatever small gift Mrs. Blackwell had left me, it might at least buy me a few more weeks of shelter. I called a car service and waited in the motel office, not wanting to stay outside my room. The same clerk from last night was still there now, sleeping with his head on the counter. He did not move as I let myself out. The law offices of Goldstein Myers and Associates were on the top floor of a shiny downtown tall building, a world away from the Starlight Motor Lodge. The receptionist, a smartly dressed young woman, offered me water in a real glass, not plastic, and invited me to sit in the nicely decorated waiting area. "Mr. Goldstein will be with you shortly." she said warmly. "May I take your coat?" Such simple politeness, yet they almost made me cry after the humiliation of the previous night. I was sitting on the edge of a leather chair, back straight, ankles crossed, when Michael Goldstein came out to greet me. He was a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and kind eyes behind expensive glasses. He shook my hand firmly, then led me to a conference room with large windows overlooking the city. "Ms. Wright, thank you for coming on such short notice," he said, asking me to sit at the polished table. "I understand you were Mrs. Blackwell's nurse for many years." 15 years, I confirmed, though towards the end she was more friend than patient. He smiled. "Yes, she spoke of you often, and with great affection. She admired how dedicated you were both, to your work and to your nephew." I felt a sadness at the mention of Ben. Mrs. Blackwell was very kind to take an interest in my personal life. More than an interest, it seems. Goldstein opened a leather folder and took out several papers. "Mrs. Blackwell changed her will 3 years ago after a particularly meaningful conversation with you. Do you remember talking about your retirement plans with her?" I thought back only vaguely. "I mentioned that my nephew had encouraged me to live with his family when I eventually retired, as I had helped him through law school and had limited savings of my own." Goldstein nodded. "Mrs. Blackwell was quite moved by your situation. She wrote down, and I quote from our conversation, that Brooklyn has given everything to a young man who may not fully appreciate her sacrifice. She deserves security in her later years, regardless of her nephew's gratitude, or lack thereof." My throat tightened. Even then, Mrs. Blackwell had seen what I could, not the possibility that Ben's promises might turn out to be empty. Mrs. Blackwell had no direct heirs. Goldstein continued. "Most of her wealth was left to her foundation, which supports medical research. However, she made special provisions for certain individuals who had shown her true care and kindness." He slid a paper across the table. "This is the relevant part of her will. You may want to read it yourself." With shaking fingers, I took the paper and began to read. The legal language was complicated, but one sentence stood out clearly. "To Brooklyn Marie Wright, who has shown me the meaning of selfless care, I leave the sum of $12,012,000 to be held in trust and given to her according to her needs and wishes." The room seemed to spin. I looked up, certain I had misunderstood. "There must be a mistake," I whispered. "Mrs. Blackwell would not." She could not. Goldstein's expression was gentle. "There is no mistake, Ms. Wright. Mrs. Blackwell was in her right mind and absolutely clear about her intentions. She wanted to make sure you would never have to rely on anyone else's promises for your security and comfort. $12 million. I repeated the words, feeling strange in my mouth. "Yes, the funds have already been transferred to a trust account in your name. As the executor, I can help you get access to them immediately for any urgent needs, and we can discuss long-term management options when you are ready." I stared at the document, unable to fully understand what it meant. Just yesterday, I had been figuring out how many days I could make my remaining cash last. Now I was wealthy, independently, securely wealthy. "Ms. Wright, are you all right?" Goldstein looked concerned. "I am staying at the Starlight Motor Lodge," I said quickly. "My nephew, he asked me to leave his home when I lost my job. He said I was a financial burden." Understanding appeared in Goldstein's eyes. "I see. Well, perhaps we should address your immediate living situation first. The Four Seasons has excellent options for longer stays while you decide on something more permanent." The difference was so absurd I almost laughed. From a cockroach-infested motel to the Four Seasons, From a discarded burden to a millionaire all in the space of 24 hours. There will be some paperwork, of course, Goldstein continued. But I can give you an advance from the trust today. Would $50,000 be enough for your immediate needs? $50,000 more than I had earned in some entire years of nursing. I nodded silently. As Goldstein arranged for the money to be prepared, reality began to sink in. I thought of Ben and Stella so quick to discard me when I was no longer useful. I thought of their faces if they knew, and they would know soon enough, that their financial burden now had more wealth than they could imagine. Part of me wanted to call Ben immediately, to throw my newfound fortune in his face like a weapon. But a deeper, wiser part held back. The money had not changed what happened. It had not erased the betrayal or healed the wound of being discarded after a lifetime of sacrifice. Ms. Wright. Goldstein's voice brought me back from my thoughts. Here is the advance, and a car is waiting to take you to the hotel whenever you are ready. I have taken the liberty of making a reservation for a suite. He handed me an envelope containing a bank check for $50,000, along with a business card. Call me anytime with questions. We will meet again next week to discuss the full trust arrangements. I thanked him, still feeling somewhat disconnected from reality. As I left his office, my phone buzzed again. 3 missed calls from Ben, followed by a text. Any news from the lawyer, call me ASAP. My fingers hovered over the screen. How easy it would be to reply to let him know his burden was now a millionaire, to watch him scramble to undo the damage, to reclaim his place in my life and my fortune. Instead, I put the phone away. Ben had shown me who he truly was, and no amount of money could change that basic truth. Whatever I did next would be for myself, not in reaction to him. The car Goldstein had arranged was waiting outside a sleek black car with a uniformed driver who handled my almost non-existent luggage with the same respect he would give a trunk full of expensive suitcases. "The Four Seasons, Miss Wright," he confirmed, holding the door for me. "Yes," I said, then hesitated. "Actually, there is somewhere else I need to go first." 20 minutes later, we pulled up in front of the Starlight Motor Lodge. The same group of men still stood by the ice machine, watching as I got out of the luxury car. Inside my sad room, I quickly gathered my few belongings. As I was zipping my suitcase, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find the motel clerk looking much more awake than earlier. "Checkout is at 11:00, he said flatly. "It is almost noon." "I am leaving now," I replied, "but I will not be needing a refund." He shrugged. "Told you last night. No refunds, no exceptions." I smiled slightly. "That is not what I meant. There is a young woman with a baby down the hall. I heard them last night. Could you use the rest of my week's payment towards her stay instead?" The clerk's expression changed from boredom to confusion. "You want to pay for some stranger's room?" "Yes, and I would like to leave this for her as well." I handed him $500 from the cash advance Goldstein had included with the check. "Please make sure she gets it." "Whatever, lady." He put the money in his pocket, but something about the way he stood suggested he might actually do what I asked. As the driver loaded my suitcases into the car, I took one last look at the Starlight Motor Lodge. Less than 24 hours ago, it had represented my lowest point, the result of a lifetime of misplaced trust and sacrificed dreams. Now it was simply another stop on a journey that had taken an unexpected turn. "To the Four Seasons now?" the driver asked. "Yes," I said, settling into the soft leather seat. "I am ready." My phone vibrated yet again, Ben calling for the 4th time. I stared at his name on the screen for a long moment, then ended the call and turned off my phone completely. Whatever came next, a confrontation, making up, or permanent separation, would happen on my terms, not his. For the first time in 45 years, my life belonged truly and only to me. And that, even more than the money, felt like the real inheritance Mrs. Blackwell had left me. The Four Seasons suite was larger than the entire guest house I had lived in for 15 years. Large windows showed the city skyline, while soft carpet quieted my footsteps. In the marble bathroom, I found toiletries that cost more than my weekly grocery bill. Soft robes and towels, so thick they felt like blankets. I stood in the middle of the living area, still wearing my blue dress and practical shoes, feeling like I did not belong. The woman who belonged in this suite was confident, sophisticated, used to luxury. I was just Brooklyn Wright, practical, unseen, easily replaced. Ms. Wright, may I offer you a welcome drink? Perhaps some tea or champagne? The hotel manager, who had personally walked me upstairs, stood nearby attentively. Goldstein's advance must have shown that I was a guest worth impressing. Tea would be lovely, thank you, I replied, still finding it hard to match my surroundings with my reality. Of course. Your luggage will be up shortly. Our concierge mentioned you might need some additional items. We would be happy to arrange shopping help or have selections brought to you. My 2 old suitcases and 3 cardboard boxes hardly deserved the name luggage, and they certainly looked out of place in this rich suite. I thought of my worn nightgown, my cheap toiletries, my single good dress that I was already wearing. Yes, I would appreciate some help with shopping, I admitted. I am afraid I had to leave most of my things behind. The manager nodded with practiced discretion. I will send our personal shopping coordinator up within the hour. She can help with immediate needs and arrange more extensive shopping when you are ready. After he left, I walked through the suite, running my fingers over expensive furniture, testing the softness of the bed, admiring the view. This was what money could buy: comfort, respect choices. For the first time, I truly understood the power Mrs. Blackwell had used so easily, and which she had now passed to me. My phone, which I had finally turned back on, vibrated again. Ben had left 6 voicemails and sent 9 text messages, each more demanding than the last. This is silly, Aunt Elle. Call me back right now. Where are you staying? This is important. The lawyer's office will not give me any information. What did they tell you? I am starting to worry. At least let me know you are safe. If you do not call back, I am filing a missing person report. That last one made me laugh out loud. I was not missing. I was exactly where he had sent me, away from his home, out of his life. That I had landed somewhere he could not have expected was not his concern. I thought about ignoring him completely, but the threat of a missing person report could be inconvenient. I sent a brief text. I am fine, busy settling into new arrangements. We will be in touch when I am ready. His reply was instant. What arrangements? Where we need to talk about the will. I can help. I put the phone down without replying. The tea arrived, served on beautiful china with small sandwiches and pastries I had not ordered. I sat by the window sipping Earl Grey tea and watching the city below, trying to organize my thoughts. 12 million. The number was still impossible to understand. What did someone like me do with that kind of money? More importantly, what kind of person did I want to be now? That financial limits no longer controlled my choices. I had spent my entire adult life taking care of others. First, Ben, then my patients. I had defined myself by my usefulness, my ability to care for those who needed me. Without that role, who was I? The shopping coordinator arrived, a stylish young woman named Mia, who wisely assessed my situation without prying. Within hours, my suite had several elegant outfits, sleepwear, proper toiletries, and even a selection of books she thought I might enjoy. All charged to my room, all chosen, with a thoughtfulness I found deeply touching. "Is there anything else you need, Miss Wright?" Mia asked as she prepared to leave. I hesitated, then decided to be honest. "I need to learn about being wealthy. I have spent my life being careful with money, and now I do not even know where to start." Mia smiled warmly. "The hotel can arrange for a financial advisor to visit tomorrow if you would like. In the meantime, my best advice, do not rush any decisions. Take time to adjust. Rich or not, you are still you." That night, wrapped in a silky nightgown that cost more than I used to spend on clothes. In a month, I lay in the large bed thinking about Mia's words. I was still me. But who exactly was that? The Brooklyn who had raised Ben, who had dedicated herself to his success, felt like a stranger now. That Brooklyn had been defined by sacrifice, by putting others' needs before her own. She had measured her worth by how useful she was. Perhaps it was time to discover who Brooklyn Wright could be when she put herself first. The next morning, I woke to sunlight shining through windows I had forgotten to close. For a moment, I was confused by the luxurious surroundings, the lack of the noisy air conditioner that had kept me awake in the guest house, the silence where Ben's family's morning routine should have been. Then I remembered this was my life now, a life of possibilities rather than duties. I ordered breakfast from room service, something I had never done before, and spent a full hour enjoying perfectly cooked eggs and fresh berries while reading the newspaper. No rushing to prepare Ben's lunch, no cleaning up after someone else's mess, just quiet enjoyment of simple pleasures. At 10:00 Lotters, the financial advisor Mia had arranged, arrived a woman in her 50s named Sarah Blackburn, whose direct manner reminded me of head nurses I had respected over the years. "Ms. Wright, I understand you have recently received a significant inheritance and need some guidance." She began setting out several folders on the dining table. "That is putting it mildly," I admitted. "Until 2 days ago, I was calculating how to make my severance payment last for 6 months. Now I have a trust fund that is larger than I can understand." She nodded. "It is a common situation, believe it or not. Sudden wealth can be as confusing as sudden poverty. Let us start with the basics. What are your immediate concerns?" "Housing," I said immediately. "I need a place to live that is not a hotel, no matter how lovely. And I need to understand what this money means day to day. How do I get access to it? What can I actually spend without being irresponsible?" For the next 3 hours, Sarah explained the basics of managing wealth. She described how the trust would likely be set up, how income would be created and given out, and how taxes would work. She helped me create a realistic budget that would allow me to live comfortably without using up the main amount. "With proper management," she concluded, "this trust could generate around $600,000 annually with careful investing. You could live quite well on a third of that and still have plenty for giving to charity travel or whatever else you might want to do." The amount surprised me greatly. My highest annual salary as a nurse had been just under $8,000, and that was after decades of experience and regular promotion. "As for housing," Sarah continued, "I would suggest renting for at least 6 months before buying. It gives you time to decide where you truly want to settle without the pressure of a major purchase. I can put you in touch with a rental agent who specializes in luxury properties if you would like." By the time she left, I had a notebook full of information, a list of next steps, and the business cards of several professionals. She recommended a lawyer for wills, an accountant, a rental agent, and a personal assistant service. "Take your time," she advised as she packed up. "Your whole life has changed. Allow yourself space to adjust, before making any major decisions. After she left, I sat at the dining table surrounded by financial documents, feeling both overwhelmed and strangely empowered. For the first time in my adult life, I had options, real significant options, that were not limited by duty or lack of money. I could live anywhere. I could travel. I could give to causes I believed in. I could go back to school if I wanted to follow interests I had given up decades ago. I could even start a foundation like Mrs. Blackwell had done. The possibilities were amazing. My phone interrupted these thoughts with yet another call from Ben. This time I decided to answer. "Aunt Elle, finally. Where are you? Are you okay? I have been worried sick." His voice had the practiced concern he used with difficult clients. "I am fine, Ben," I replied calmly. "I am staying at a hotel while I consider my options." "A hotel? With what money?" The question came out before he could stop himself, showing the assumption behind his worry. Without access to his home, I must be broke. "I have enough money," I said, being deliberately unclear. The meeting with Mrs. Blackwell's attorney went well. A moment of silence then. "So she did leave you something. What was it? A small gift? A yearly payment?" "It was generous," I said, still not wanting to reveal the full amount of my inheritance. "More than enough to make sure I will not need to bother you or work at a senior living place." That is wonderful news," Ben said, his tone quickly changing. "Listen, Stella and I feel terrible about the other day. We were stressed about the renovation schedule and things came out wrong. Why do not you come back and stay with us? The guest house is still yours until Monday, and after that we could turn the small room into a lovely bedroom for you. The small room off the kitchen that was also used as a mudroom in winter." I closed my eyes, picturing myself in that cramped space, listening to Stella complain about my presence, feeling Ben's resentment every time he looked at me. "That is very kind," I said. "But I have already made other plans." "What plans? Where look? I am sure whatever Mrs. Blackwell left you is nice, but you need to be practical. Let me help you manage it properly so it lasts." There it was, the assumption that I could not possibly handle my own affairs, that I needed his superior intelligence to guide me. Just days ago, I might have believed him. Now I knew better. "I have hired a financial advisor," I said, "and a rental agent. I will be looking at apartments tomorrow." "A financial advisor rental agent." He sounded genuinely confused, as if I had said I was hiring a rocket scientist and an elephant trainer. "Aunt Elle, those services cost money. Let me help you. It is what family does." Family. The word hung between us, filled with a history he seemed to have conveniently forgotten. "Yes, they do cost money," I agreed. "Luckily, I can afford them now. How much exactly did Mrs. Blackwell leave you?" The false concern was disappearing, replaced by simple curiosity. "Enough," I said simply. "Ben, I need to go. I have another appointment." "Wait. At least tell me where you're staying. I can come by. We can talk through your options face to face." "That will not be necessary. I will be in touch when I am more settled." I hung up before he could argue further, then turned my phone to silent. The conversation had made something important. Clear Ben did not regret pushing me out. He regretted losing control of me, and by extension, whatever Mrs. Blackwell had left me. As I looked out at the city skyline, I felt something unfamiliar growing within me. Not just independence, but a quiet, steady confidence. For the first time, I held the power in our relationship. I could choose when and how to interact with Ben, rather than anxiously trying to please his every wish. Mrs. Blackwell's fortune was not just financial security. It was freedom. The freedom to define myself on my own terms, to make choices based on my own desires, rather than others' needs, to discover who Brooklyn Wright might become when she put herself first. I picked up the card for the rental agent Sarah had recommended and made the call. "Hello, this is Brooklyn Wright. I am looking for a luxury apartment in the riverfront area, preferably with a view of the park. Something spacious, elegant, and available immediately." As I spoke, I saw my reflection in the window, shoulders back, head held high, voice steady, with newfound assurance. I barely recognized myself. Perhaps that was the point. Perhaps it was time to become someone new. The rental agent, Diane Keller, moved with the easy confidence of someone used to luxury. She had arrived at the Four Seasons in a fancy convertible dressed perfectly in a cream suit that probably cost more than my former monthly salary. I had worried she might dismiss me, a 65-year-old woman, in newly bought clothes, clearly out of my usual environment. But Sarah's recommendation had opened doors. "Ms. Wright, I have selected 5 properties that fit your criteria," Diane explained as we drove through the riverfront area. "All are available right away with flexible lease terms. I thought we would start with the most exclusive option and work our way down." The most exclusive option turned out to be the penthouse of the Monarch, a shiny residential building overlooking Riverside Park. The doorman greeted Diane by name, and the concierge offered us coffee before we even reached the elevator. The Monarch is home to several company heads, a few professional athletes, and at least one Oscar winner, Diane mentioned casually as we went up to the 32nd floor. The facilities are unmatched 24-hour concierge, private chef service, car service, rooftop pool spa, and fitness center with trainers on staff. The elevator opened directly into the penthouse entrance hall, where large windows revealed a panoramic view of the city that took my breath away. Sunlight reflected off polished marble floors, lighting a space larger than Ben's entire ground floor. 3 bedrooms each with their own bathroom, a chef's kitchen, formal dining room, living room, library, and media room, Diane described as we toured the space. The main bedroom includes a sitting area, walk-in closet, and a bathroom with heated floors and a soaking tub. It was magnificent. It was also completely unfamiliar. I could not imagine myself living in such luxury. Where would I put my small collection of mystery paperbacks? How would I feel making a simple cup of tea in that huge kitchen? "It is beautiful," I said honestly, "but I do not think it is quite right for me." If Diane was disappointed, she did not show it. "Let us try the next property. It is slightly smaller but has more personality." The second option was a renovated apartment in an old building, exposed brick walls, wooden floors, and large factory-style windows. While still luxurious, it felt warmer than the penthouse. The third was a classic old apartment with decorative molding and a fireplace. The fourth was a modern house with a small garden. Each was lovely in its own way, but none felt like home. "You are not connecting with any of these?" Diane observed as we left the fourth property. "What is missing?" I hesitated, trying to express feelings I was just starting to understand. "They are all beautiful, but they feel like someone else's life. I spent decades in small practical spaces, making the best of what I had. I want something nicer now, but I need it to still feel like me." Diane nodded thoughtfully. "I have one more property to show you. It was not on my original list because it is not in the riverfront area, but I think it might be what you are looking for." She drove us to Lakeside Heights, a neighborhood I had always admired from a distance, elegant, but not showy, with tree-lined streets and a mix of well-kept old homes and newer ones. We stopped in front of a Victorian townhouse painted a soft blue with white trim. "It is a recent restoration," Diane explained as she unlocked the front door. The owners kept the historical details while updating the systems and layout for modern living. Inside, sunlight streamed through colored glass windows, casting colorful patterns on polished wooden floors. The rooms were spacious but not too big, with graceful arches and built-in bookshelves. The kitchen had high-end appliances that somehow did not take away from the room's natural charm. French doors opened onto a private garden with mature trees and a small fountain. As we toured the 3 bedrooms and study, I could imagine my few treasured possessions finding natural places here. My books on the shelves, my mother's blanket on the window seat, Mrs. Blackwell's chess set on the table by the garden doors. "The main bedroom has been completely updated," Diane said, leading me upstairs. "But they kept the original features where possible." The bedroom was large but not huge, with a curved window overlooking the garden. The attached bathroom had an old-fashioned bathtub, as well as a modern shower marble counters and heated floors. "There is also this," Diane added, opening a door to reveal a small sitting room with walls of bookshelves and a comfortable window seat. The previous owner used it as a reading room. I stood in the middle of the space, feeling something I had not expected, a sense of belonging. This house, with its mix of history and comfort, elegance, and practicality, was not just a place I could live. It was a place I could become myself. "This is it," I said quietly. "This feels right." Diane smiled. "I thought it might. It is available furnished or unfurnished, and the owners are willing to be flexible on the lease terms. The monthly rent is $2,500. A year ago, that number would have seemed impossible, an amount I might earn in 2 months of full-time work. Now it represented a small part of the income my trust would generate annually. "I will take it furnished for now," I decided. "I can always replace pieces over time if I want to make it more my own." "Excellent. I will drop off the paperwork this afternoon. With the references Sarah provided, we should be able to have you moved in by tomorrow." As we drove back to the hotel, I felt a strange mix of excitement and nervousness. The townhouse represented more than just a new address. It was the first significant choice I had made solely for myself in decades. "Miss Wright," Diane said as she dropped me at the hotel, "if you do not mind my saying so, you seem to be at a major turning point in your life." I laughed softly. "That is quite an understatement." "Well, in my experience, new beginnings often benefit from new viewpoints. Your home should reflect who you are becoming, not just who you have been." Her words stayed with me as I returned to my suite. Who was I becoming? The question felt both terrifying and exciting. Back in my room, I found several messages waiting, 3 more from Ben, increasingly frustrated, and one from Michael Goldstein, confirming our meeting the following week to finalize the trust arrangements. There was also a handwritten note from the hotel manager inviting me to contact him personally if I needed anything during my stay. The contrast was stark. In just 3 days, I had gone from being rudely kicked out of my nephew's guest house to being sought after by luxury places and professionals. Nothing about me had fundamentally changed. I was still the same Brooklyn Wright who had spent decades as a nurse, who preferred tea to coffee, and mysteries to complex literature, who could find her way in a hospital, but felt lost in a high-end store. What had changed was my perceived value to others, all because of a number in a bank account. It was a sobering realization. The world treated people differently, based not on their inherent worth, but on their financial status. Ben had seen me as a burden when he believed me poor. Now he was desperate to reconnect. The hotel staff, who might have ignored me a week ago, now treated me with respect. The question was, How would I use this new reality? Would I become like those who had dismissed me, concerned only with status and appearance? Or could I find a way to use my unexpected fortune to create meaning and purpose on my own terms? I spent that evening writing in a journal something I had not done since my 20s. I wrote about the whirlwind of the past few days, my feelings about Ben's betrayal, my fears about the future, and my hopeful thoughts for what might come next. Writing made something important clear. I was not angry at Ben for not supporting me financially. I was hurt that he had so easily thrown away the relationship itself. That after 45 years of constant devotion, he saw me as nothing more than an item on his budget, a burden to be managed, rather than a person to be loved. Money had not created that flaw in his character. It had merely revealed it. And no amount of money could fix what had been broken between us. As that truth settled in my heart, I felt a curious lightness, as if I had set down a heavy burden I had carried for years, the burden of believing I could earn Ben's love and gratitude through sacrifice. I could not. I never could have. His ability for real appreciation had nothing to do with my efforts, and everything to do with his own character. That night I slept more peacefully than I had in years, free from the weight of unmet expectations. The next morning I woke with purpose. By noon I had signed the lease on the townhouse arranged for the few belongings in my hotel room to be moved, and met with a personal shopper to select additional items. I would need everything from kitchen tools to towels to a few more basic clothes. By evening I was settled in my new home, sitting in the garden with a cup of tea, watching the sunset color the sky pink and gold. The fountain bubbled softly, birds called to each other as they settled for the night, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of jasmine from nearby plants. For the first time in decades, I was living in a space that was truly mine, making choices based solely on my own preferences and needs. The feeling was strange, almost confusing, but undeniably right. My phone rang, interrupting the peaceful moment. Ben again. This time I decided to answer. "Aunt Elle, this is ridiculous." He began without saying hello. "You cannot just disappear like this. I have been calling and texting for days." "I am not disappearing, Ben. I am establishing my new life." "New life? What are you talking about?" "Look, I understand that you are upset about the guest house situation, but we can work something out. Maybe we can find you a small apartment nearby that we could help pay for." I closed my eyes, taking in the nerve. 3 days ago, he was sending me to a senior living facility to work for my room and board. Now he was kindly offering to help pay for a small apartment. "That will not be necessary," I said calmly. "I have already found a place." "Where? How are you paying for it, Aunt Elle? Whatever Mrs. Blackwell left, you cannot possibly afford to live independently for long. You need to be practical." There it was again, the assumption that I could not possibly make sound decisions without his guidance, that I was fundamentally incapable. "Ben," I said, my voice steady, "I have spent my entire adult life being practical. I worked extra shifts to pay for your private school fees. I sold my parents' home to fund your law school expenses. I gave up my own retirement savings to support your dreams. I think I understand practicality better than most." That is not what I meant," he stuttered. "I just want to make sure you are not making quick decisions based on sadness or anger." "I am not angry, Ben. I am awake." The words came without thinking, but as soon as I spoke them, I knew they were true. I had been living life without truly defining myself by how useful I was to others, measuring my worth by their approval. Mrs. Blackwell's gift had awakened me, not because of the money itself, but because it had forced me to face difficult truths about my relationships and who I was. What does that even mean? Ben sounded genuinely confused. Aunt Ella, I am worried about you. You are not making sense. Maybe I should come see you, make sure you are okay. I am more than okay, I replied. I am becoming the person I was meant to be before I put my life on hold to raise you. It is an uncomfortable process, but a necessary one. A long pause followed. When Ben spoke again, his tone had shifted from confusion to calculation. This is about the inheritance, is not it? I knew it. That is why you are being so secretive. How much did she leave you, Aunt Elle? You can tell me. I am family. Family. There was that word again used like a tool, a claim on my loyalty, my money, my very self. Yes, this is about the inheritance, I acknowledged, but not in the way you think. Mrs. Blackwell's gift was not just financial security. It was the freedom to see clearly, to make choices based on my own needs, rather than others' expectations. So it is money, Ben pressed. How much? It must be significant if you have already rented a place. Is it a yearly payment? A trust, Aunt Elle? You know I can help you manage it properly. Financial planning is part of what I do. I looked around at my new garden, at the home I had chosen for myself, at the life I was starting to build on my own terms. Ben's question suddenly seemed irrelevant, his concern clearly self-interested. Ben, I said softly, whether Mrs. Blackwell left me 1,000 or 1,000,000, the amount is not what matters. What matters is that I have finally understood something important. My worth is not determined by what I can give to others. It is part of who I am. That is very philosophical, Aunt Elle, but it does not address the practical reality of your situation. My practical reality is no longer your concern, I said with a finality that surprised even me. When you called me a burden and gave me 48 hours to leave your home, you gave up any right to be involved in my life decisions. You are being unfair, he protested. I was under a lot of stress, and Stella... No, Ben. For the first time in a very long time, I am being completely fair to myself. I gave you everything I had, and you discarded me when I was no longer useful. That moment revealed the truth of our relationship, and no amount of backtracking can change it. Silence stretched between us, filled with 45 years of unspoken truths. So that is it? Ben finally said, his voice tight. After everything we have been through, you are just cutting me off. The irony was so strong, I almost laughed. I am not cutting you off, Ben. I am setting boundaries. There is a difference. Boundaries? He repeated the word, strange in his mouth. And what exactly do these boundaries mean? I considered the question carefully, knowing that my answer would shape our relationship or lack of one going forward. They mean I will no longer sacrifice my well-being for your convenience. They mean I will make decisions based on what is right for me, not what you expect of me. They mean I am no longer available to be used and discarded according to your financial calculations. That is not fair, he repeated, but the protest sounded empty even to my ears. Fairness is not the point, Ben. Self-respect is. For the first time in my adult life, I am putting myself first. Not because I am selfish, but because I recognize that I matter, that my life has value beyond what I can give to others. As I spoke these words, something deep inside me changed. The hurt and betrayal that had controlled my emotions since that night in Ben's kitchen did not disappear, but they lessened, making space for something new, a calm, steady sense of my own worth that did not depend on approval from others. It was not about the money. It was about finally truly believing that I deserved better, than what Ben had offered that I had always deserved better. "I need to go," I said, not unkindly. "It has been a long day and I am still settling into my new home." "Will you at least tell me where you are living?" Ben tried one last time. "In case of emergency. If there is a real emergency, you can reach me on my cell phone," I replied. "Goodbye, Ben." I ended the call and put my phone aside, returning my attention to the peaceful garden. The sky had become a deep blue stars beginning to appear above the trees. A sense of profound calm settled over me. Not happiness exactly, not yet, but a quiet confidence that happiness was now possible. I was Brooklyn Wright, 65 years old, starting over. I had a beautiful home, financial security, and most precious of all, the freedom to discover who I might become when I lived for myself instead of others. As night fully arrived, I stayed in the garden, breathing in the scent of jasmine, listening to the fountain's gentle sound, feeling the weight of decades of self-neglect begin to lift from my shoulders. Tomorrow would bring new decisions, new possibilities. For tonight it was enough to simply exist in this moment of change, this quiet space between who I had been and who I might become. My first week in the townhouse passed quickly with small decisions that felt huge after decades of compromise. I chose new bed sheets in rich colors instead of the practical plain ones I had always bought before. I arranged for fresh flowers to be delivered weekly. I subscribed to the symphony and the theater luxuries I had stopped when Ben started college. Each morning I woke to sunlight filtering through colored glass, briefly confused by the unfamiliar beauty around me. Each evening I sat in my garden with a glass of wine, reflecting on the day's discoveries. I was getting to know myself again, not just who I had been before Ben, but who I might become now, shaped by both my history of sacrifice and my newfound freedom. My meeting with Michael Goldstein to complete the trust arrangements was scheduled for Monday morning. Having spent the weekend settling into my new home, I felt a growing sense of purpose as I prepared for what would be, in many ways, the official start of my new life. I chose my outfit with care, a well-fitting blue suit, bought during my shopping trip, pearl earrings, inherited from my mother, and the pin Mrs. Blackwell had given me. As I fastened the delicate silver and opal piece to my jacket, I felt a connection to the woman whose generosity had changed my life. "I will make good use of your gift, Brooklyn," I promised quietly. Not just the money, but the freedom it represents. The offices of Goldstein, Myers & Associates were as impressive as I remembered. The receptionist greeted me by name, offering coffee in a real cup instead of the paper or plastic I had become used to. Michael Goldstein came out of his office with a warm smile, escorting me to the same conference room with its large windows showing views of the city. "Ms. Wright, you are looking well," he observed. "I understand from Sarah Blackburn that you found housing." "Yes, a townhouse in Lakeside Heights. It is beautiful, elegant, but not overwhelming." He nodded approvingly. "An excellent choice. That neighborhood has kept its value, even through market changes." We were joined by 2 other lawyers and an accountant, all of whom treated me with a respect I found both pleasant and slightly uncomfortable. For the next hour, they explained the details of Mrs. Blackwell's gift, how the trust was structured, the investment plan, the tax effects, and my options for accessing the funds. The trust is designed to provide you with an annual income of approximately $600,000, as Sarah likely explained, Goldstein said. The main amount will remain invested with a part set aside for growth to counteract inflation. You will have access to additional funds for major purchases such as real estate or significant donations, with approval from the trustee, which is generally just a formality. I tried to grasp how large the amount he was describing was. My annual nurse's salary, even at the highest point of my career, had never exceeded $80,000. Now I would receive more than 7 times that amount, guaranteed for life, without working a single day. There is one more element to discuss. Goldstein continued sliding a folder across the table. Mrs. Blackwell established a charitable foundation several years ago, focusing mainly on medical research and healthcare access for people in need. She named you as a board member starting after her death. I stared at him momentarily, unable to speak. A board member, but I do not have any experience with charity work or foundations. Goldstein smiled. Mrs. Blackwell was quite insistent. She believed your decades of practical healthcare experience would provide valuable perspective. The position includes a modest payment of $50,000 annually, though you are not required to accept. $50,000 as a modest payment for attending a few meetings. The number would have been more than half of my former annual income. The board meets every 3 months. Goldstein continued. The next meeting is actually this Thursday. As a new member, you are welcome to simply observe this first time, though. Your input would certainly be valued. I opened the folder to find information about the Brooklyn Blackwell Foundation, its mission, current projects, and organizations it supported. Many focused on addressing healthcare inequalities I had seen firsthand during my nursing career. I would be honored to serve, I said, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. Mrs. Blackwell was passionate about making healthcare more accessible. I would like to help continue that work. Goldstein nodded approvingly. She would be pleased to hear that. Now let us finalize the paperwork for the trust itself. For the next hour, I signed document after document, officially accepting Mrs. Blackwell's gift and the responsibilities that came with it. With each signature, I felt a curious mixture of gratitude, determination, and an unexpected sense of purpose. This was not just about financial security. It was about honoring Mrs. Blackwell's faith in me about using this unexpected gift in ways that would make a meaningful difference. As the meeting concluded, Goldstein handed me a sleek checkbook and credit card linked to the trust account. Your initial discretionary funds have been deposited $500 for immediate expenses. The regular income distributions will begin next month. If you need additional funds before, then just let us know. $500,000 for immediate expenses. The sum was so far beyond my previous reality that I could not fully understand it. Is there anything else you need from us today, Miss Wright? Goldstein asked. I hesitated, then decided to be direct. Yes, actually. I would like your advice on fully regaining my financial independence. My nephew has been difficult since learning about the inheritance. I want to ensure he has no access to or claim on any of my resources. Goldstein's expression changed slightly. I understand. The trust itself is well protected, but we should review any joint accounts, property arrangements, or legal documents that might give your nephew leverage. Do you have a will? A basic one made years ago. Ben is the main beneficiary. Goldstein nodded. We have an excellent team for planning wills. I can arrange a meeting this week if you would like. Yes, please. And I paused, thinking about a question that had been bothering me. What about the house my nephew lives in? I paid for it originally, though the deed is in his name. Goldstein's eyebrows rose slightly. You bought the property outright? Yes. I sold my parents' home and used the money as the down payment, then continued to pay the mortgage from my salary until it was fully paid off 5 years ago. Ben insisted on putting the deed in his name for estate planning purposes, as he called it. Goldstein made a note. Property law is not my specialty, but if you have proof of your financial contributions, There might be grounds for claiming ownership. I will have our real estate lawyer review the situation. By the time I left Goldstein's office, I had appointments scheduled with a will lawyer, a real estate expert, and a security consultant who would help me protect my online and financial information. As I rode the elevator down to the lobby, I thought about how quickly my priorities had changed. A week ago, I had been focused on basic survival, finding affordable housing, making my severance payment last, possibly working past retirement age, just to make ends meet. Now I was arranging to protect millions and possibly reclaim a house I had paid for, but never legally owned. The lobby was busy with the midday rush, lawyers, clients, messengers, all moving with the purposeful energy of people whose time was valuable. As I waited for my ride, I noticed a familiar figure near the reception desk, tall, expensively dressed with the confident bearing I would recognize anywhere. Ben. For a moment I considered going back to the elevator, avoiding a confrontation for which I felt unprepared. But something stopped me, the same quiet strength that had allowed me to set boundaries during our last phone call. I would not hide. Not anymore. I approached the reception desk where Ben was speaking to the receptionist in the slightly condescending tone he used for service workers. I understand client information is confidential, but this is a family matter. My Aunt Brooklyn Wright has been meeting with Michael Goldstein regarding an inheritance, and I am concerned about her ability to manage complex financial arrangements at her age. The receptionist kept a professional manner. I am afraid I cannot confirm any client relationships, sir. If you would like to leave your contact information, I can pass it along to Mr. Goldstein. This is ridiculous, Ben said, raising his voice slightly. I am a lawyer myself. I understand confidentiality, but I am talking about my elderly aunt, who has no experience with large assets. It would be irresponsible to allow her to make decisions without proper guidance. Perhaps you could guide me now, Ben, I said, calmly stepping forward, since you are so concerned about my decision-making ability. He spun around, momentarily speechless. I enjoyed the rare sight of Ben caught off guard, his carefully built image of concern cracking to reveal the clear self-interest beneath. Aunt Elle. He recovered quickly. What a coincidence, I was just trying to connect with your attorney. I have been worried about you. So I heard, I replied, nodding towards the receptionist who was watching our exchange with professional neutrality. You seemed quite concerned about my ability to manage my own affairs. Ben had the decency to look embarrassed, though I suspected it was more about being caught than about his actual behavior. I just want to make sure you are getting proper advice, he explained, lowering his voice and taking my elbow to guide me away from the desk. These inheritance situations can be complicated, and you have never dealt with significant assets before. I gently but firmly removed my arm from his grasp. I appreciate your concern, but as I told you on the phone, I have excellent professional advisors now. I do not need your guidance. Ben's expression became slightly harder. Aunt Elle, be reasonable. You are 65 years old, and you have spent your life as a nurse, suddenly managing significant assets. How do you know the assets are significant? I interrupted. I never told you the amount Mrs. Blackwell left me. He hesitated just for a moment. Well, you have rented a place. You mentioned financial advisors. It is obviously substantial. I am just trying to protect you. From whom? Ben? From the professionals Mrs. Blackwell herself chose to manage her estate, or from myself? Do you truly believe I am unable to make sound decisions? Of course not, but experience matters in financial management. I deal with these issues professionally. I could save you considerable fees by handling things myself. There it was, the real motivation, the not concern for my well-being. but the opportunity to control my resources, to position himself as the controller of whatever Mrs. Blackwell had left me. "Ben," I said, keeping my voice level, "let me be absolutely clear. I neither want nor need your help with my financial affairs. My resources, whatever they may be, are mine to manage as I see fit. Your involvement is not welcome." His face flushed. "After everything I have done for you, this is how you repay me, by shutting me out completely." The sheer audacity of his statement took my breath away for a moment. Everything he had done for me. When had Ben ever done anything that did not ultimately benefit himself? "What exactly have you done for me, Ben?" I asked quietly. "Provided a guest house that you took back the moment I no longer had income. Suggested I move to a senior facility where I could work for my room and board. Called me a financial burden to my face. That is not fair," he protested, lowering his voice as several people looked our way. "I was under a lot of pressure with the renovation schedule and Stella's expectations. I always intended to help you find a suitable alternative." "A suitable alternative," I repeated. "Like the small room off your kitchen that you so kindly offered after learning Mrs. Blackwell had left me something." Ben's expression shifted, calculation replacing indignation. "Look, we got off on the wrong start with all this. Why do not we go somewhere private and talk? We are family, Aunt Elle. We should not be arguing like this. Family. That word again used when convenient, forgotten, when not. No, Ben. I am not interested in another conversation where you try to control, manipulate, or make me feel small. Our relationship going forward will be on my terms, not yours." "Your terms?" He looked genuinely confused, as if the idea of me setting conditions was impossible to understand. "Yes, my terms, which begin with you respecting my independence and my boundaries. I am not a helpless old woman in need of your protection. I am not a resource for you to control. I am a person whole and complete in myself, who deserves basic respect." Ben stared at me as if seeing a stranger. In some ways, he was. The aunt he knew, the one who had put her needs below his for decades, was gone, replaced by a woman who finally understood her own worth. "I would like you to leave now," I continued calmly. "And in the future, please do not attempt to interfere with my legal or financial affairs. Any such efforts will be reported to the proper authorities as harassment." "Harassment!" Ben sputtered. "That is ridiculous. I am your nephew." "Being related does not give you rights, Ben. Remember that." With those words, I turned and walked towards the building exit, where my car service was waiting. I did not look back to see Ben's reaction. I did not need to. For the first time in our relationship, his response did not control my emotions or actions. As the car drove away from the curb, I felt a curious lightness, as if I had set down a burden I had carried so long I had forgotten its weight. The confrontation with Ben had not been comfortable, but it had been necessary, a public statement of my independence witnessed not just by Ben, but by myself. I was no longer the woman who would tolerate dismissal or manipulation for the sake of family peace. I was no longer defined by what I could give or how I could serve. I was Brooklyn Wright. Not aunt, not nurse, not caretaker, just Brooklyn, a woman of substance and worth, claiming her right to decide for herself. And it felt at long last like coming home to myself. My confrontation with Ben in the law office lobby marked a turning point. Having declared my independence, I now needed to secure it not just emotionally, but legally and financially. The days that followed were filled with meetings as I systematically separated my life from Ben's influence and built protections around my new circumstances. The will lawyer Goldstein recommended Victoria Chen was a formidable woman in her 50s with a reputation for strong asset protection methods. Her office, unlike Goldstein's modern space, was in a converted Victorian mansion with dark wood and leather-bound law books on the walls. "Ms. Wright," she began after reviewing my situation, "your case presents several interesting challenges. First, we need to update your will immediately to reflect your current wishes. Second, we should discuss trusts for any specific gifts you might want protected. Third, we need to address the property question the house your nephew currently lives in." I nodded, feeling a curious mix of worry and determination. "I would like to start with the will. I no longer wish to leave everything to Ben." Victoria nodded, not surprised. "Do you have alternative people in mind to receive things? Other family members, friends, charitable organizations?" The question made me pause. After decades focused on Ben, I had few close relationships. Most of my friends were former co-workers with whom I had lost touch after moving to Ben's property. My sister Ben's mother had never reappeared after abandoning him. I had no children of my own, no siblings, no extended family I stayed in contact with. "I am not sure," I admitted. "Perhaps the Brooklyn Blackwell Foundation. I have recently joined the board. A foundation is certainly a worthy recipient." Victoria agreed. "But I would suggest taking some time to consider this carefully. Your circumstances have changed greatly, and your will planning should reflect not just your current situation, but your developing values and priorities." She was right, of course. I was still discovering what mattered to me, still exploring what kind of legacy I might want to leave. "For now," Victoria continued practically, "let us draft a temporary will that removes Ben as the main recipient and establishes the foundation as a temporary placeholder. You can revise it again once you have had more time to consider your options." The afternoon passed in detailed discussions of will planning strategies I had never imagined would be relevant to my life trusts for future generations, charitable trusts, private foundations. By the end, my head was spinning, but I had signed a new will that reflected my current wishes and protected my assets from Ben's potential claims. "Now about the house," Victoria said, moving to the next item on her list. "I have reviewed the documents you provided. The situation is complex but not without hope." She spread several documents across her desk: the original purchase agreement, mortgage statements, bank records showing my payments over the years. "While the deed is in Ben's name, we have clear evidence that you provided the entire down payment and all subsequent mortgage payments. Under the legal principle of resulting trust, we can make a strong argument that you are the beneficial owner of the property, regardless of the name on the deed." "What does that mean exactly?" I asked, trying to understand the legal terms. "It means that although the legal title is in Ben's name, the equitable ownership, the right to the value of the property, may still belong to you. The law recognizes that sometimes property is registered in one person's name when it is actually intended to benefit another." "I never intended to give Ben the house outright," I confirmed. "He insisted the deed should be in his name for estate planning purposes. But the understanding was always that it was family property that I had paid for." Victoria made a note. "Did you have this understanding in writing? Any emails, letters, even text messages that confirm this arrangement?" I thought back to those years. No written agreement. It was family. I trusted him. The innocence of that trust was painfully clear now. "That makes it more difficult, but not impossible," Victoria said. "The financial records tell a convincing story. At minimum, we can likely establish a claim for the value you contributed. I do not necessarily want to force Ben out of the house. I clarified, surprising myself with the realization as I spoke. I just want recognition, acknowledgement that the home he lives in, the foundation of his privileged life, came from my sacrifice. Victoria studied me thoughtfully. This is not just about the money for you. No, I admitted. It is about justice, about truth, about making visible what has been invisible for too long. My contribution, my worth. She nodded understanding. Then perhaps we approach this differently. Instead of immediately filing for a resulting trust, we prepare the case and then open negotiations. The threat of legal action, with the potential public exposure that would involve, might be leverage enough to achieve the recognition you're seeking. The word leverage resonated with me. For so long, I had been without power in my relationship with Ben, limited by my financial dependence and emotional investment. Now, for the first time, I held real leverage, not just through Mrs. Blackwell's inheritance, but through my willingness to speak truth and demand justice. I like that approach. I agreed. Let us prepare the case, but hold off on filing anything until we have tried negotiation. 2 weeks later, I sat across from Ben and his attorney in Victoria's conference room. The atmosphere was tense, the pretense of family closeness completely gone. Ben looked visibly older since our encounter in the law office lobby, new lines around his mouth, a tightness in his jaw that had not been there before. His attorney, Martin Reynolds, spoke first. My client is willing to discuss a reasonable agreement regarding your financial contributions to the property, Ms. Wright. However, we maintain that there was never any intention for you to keep an ownership interest. Victoria's response was calm, but firm. The financial records speak for themselves, Mr. Reynolds. Ms. Wright provided the entire down payment of $250,000 and made every mortgage payment for 15 years, totaling an additional $650,000. The current market value of the property is $1.8 million. Our position is that Ms. Wright is entitled to the full value of the home. Ben's face turned red. That is outrageous. The house is in my name. It is where my family lives. You cannot just take it because you have suddenly decided you want it back. I looked at him. This man I had raised, had loved without condition, had sacrificed everything for. Even now, facing clear evidence of my financial contribution, he could not acknowledge the truth. In his mind, anything he had was his by right, regardless of how he had gotten it. I do not want to take your home, Ben, I said quietly. I never did. His expression changed from anger to weariness. Then what do you want? Acknowledgement. Recognition of the truth. I bought that house. Every dollar came from me. I gave it to you freely, out of love. All I am asking is that you admit that reality, rather than continuing to pretend it was somehow your achievement. Ben looked genuinely confused. If you do not want the house or the money, then what is the point of all this? His inability to understand anything beyond financial transactions struck me as profoundly sad. The emotional accounting that had governed my life, the tally of love, sacrifice, and mutual care, was simply invisible to him. The point, Victoria interjected smoothly, is that Ms. Wright is entitled to recognition of her contribution whether or not she chooses to use her right to reclaim the property. Now we are prepared to file a resulting trust claim, which would become public record. Given Mr. Harrington's professional position, I imagine that might be uncomfortable. The threat of public exposure hung in the air. Ben, I knew, had built his legal career on a carefully constructed image of self-made success. The revelation that his family home, the visible symbol of his achievement, had been entirely paid for by his retired nurse aunt, would completely ruin that story. What exactly are you suggesting? Martin asked, his tone more conciliatory. Victoria slid a document across the table. A formal acknowledgement of Ms. Wright's financial contribution to the property, signed by Mr. Harrington and officially witnessed. In exchange, Ms. Wright will sign a document legally transferring any interest she might have in the property to Mr. Harrington. And that is it? Ben asked, suspicious. You just want me to sign a piece of paper saying you bought the house. That is it. I confirmed. Just the truth formally acknowledged. Ben and Martin talked quietly for several minutes. Finally, Martin looked up. We will need to review the exact wording of the acknowledgement, but in principle, my client is willing to accept these terms. Relief washed over me, not because I had won, but because I had finally been seen. The invisible effort, the countless sacrifices, the uncounted dollars would no longer remain hidden. They would be acknowledged, documented, made real. As Ben signed the agreement an hour later, his hand paused briefly over the paragraph stating that I had provided the entire purchase price and all mortgage payments for the family home. Our eyes met across the table, and for just a moment I saw something unexpected, a flicker of shame quickly hidden, but clearly present. He knew. He had always known, and now he knew that I knew too. Is there anything else? He asked stiffly as the witness stamped the document. No, I said simply. That is all I wanted. 6 months later, I sat in the garden of my townhouse watching autumn leaves fall from the old maple tree that shaded my reading spot. The days had become shorter, the air cooler, but I still preferred my morning coffee outdoors, wrapped in a soft blanket that had been a luxury I would never have allowed myself in my previous life. My phone chimed with a message from Sophia Martinez, the Foundation's executive director. The healthcare program I had strongly supported for rural areas was showing promising early results. More visits for preventative care, better management of long-term illnesses, and positive feedback from communities that had previously lacked medical access. I smiled, feeling a sense of purpose that had nothing to do with obligation and everything to do with genuine passion. My nursing experience, the very background Ben and Stella had dismissed as unimportant, was proving extremely valuable in improving healthcare access for underserved people. Next to my coffee cup sat an invitation, a cream card with gold printing announcing the annual party for the Brooklyn Blackwell Foundation. As a board member, my attendance was expected. As the first anniversary of Mrs. Blackwell's passing approached, I had decided to establish a nursing scholarship in her name aimed at students who, like me, entered healthcare later in life after another career. The doorbell rang, stopping my thoughts. My housekeeper, Maria, answered it, then appeared in the garden doorway. Ms. Wright, there is a young woman here to see you. She says her name is Lily Harrington. I set down my coffee, surprised. Ben's daughter, my grandniece, whom I had barely seen in recent years except at formal family gatherings. What could she possibly want? Lily stood awkwardly in my living room, tall and thin like her father, but with a vulnerability in her expression that Ben never showed. At 18, she was on the edge of adulthood, no longer the distant child who had been sent between boarding schools and summer camps. Aunt Elle, she said, using the family name I had not heard in months. I hope it is okay that I came by. Dad does not know I am here. Of course it is okay, I assured her, gesturing towards the sofa. Please sit. Would you like some tea or coffee? She shook her head, fingers twisting nervously in her lap. I wanted to talk to you about everything that happened. I sat across from her, waiting. Whatever had brought her here, it clearly was not easy for her to say. I found the papers, she finally said. The ones where you bought our house. Dad had them in his home office. I was looking for my birth certificate and I found them instead. I nodded, understanding appearing. I see. He never told us. Lily continued, her voice tight with emotion. He always talked about how he bought the house himself right after law school. How it was the first step in building our family's security. That was his story to tell, I said gently, not mine. But it was not true. Lily's voice rose slightly, then she stopped herself. Sorry. It is just... I do not understand. Why would he lie about something like that? And why would you let him? The questions were so sincere, so completely innocent, that they caught me off guard. How could I explain to this young woman the complex emotional ways that had controlled my relationship with her father? The unspoken agreement of sacrifice and obligation, the silent removal of my contribution, the quiet understanding never to acknowledge the true balance of power. Your father and I had different understandings of our family relationship, I said carefully. I never expected recognition or repayment for what I contributed. It was enough for me to see him succeed, to know I had helped make that possible. But that is not fair, Lily insisted with the clear moral certainty of youth. You gave up everything for him, and he just took it. Then he threw you out when you lost your job. So she knew about that too. I wondered how much she had found out and how much Ben had been forced to admit. Life is not always fair, I acknowledged. But it does have a way of balancing accounts eventually. I am in a good place now, better than I could have imagined a year ago. Lily looked around my home, taking in the tasteful furniture, the fresh flowers, the obvious comfort. Because of the inheritance? Partly, I agreed, but more because I have finally learned to value myself, to make choices based on my own needs and desires, rather than someone else's expectations. I want to learn from you, Lily said suddenly, her words coming out quickly. Dad does not know this yet, but I have put off my acceptance to business school. I want to study nursing instead. Of all the surprises this day might have held, this was perhaps the most unexpected. Nursing, but I thought you were following your father's path into law or finance. That was never my dream, Lily admitted. It was his. I have always been drawn to healthcare, to making a direct difference in people's lives. And after finding those papers, after learning how you supported our family all those years while working as a nurse, it just confirmed what I already felt. Emotion filled my throat, not just at her career choice, but at the recognition it represented. In seeking to learn from me to follow a path similar to mine, Lily was affirming the value of my life's work in a way Ben never had. Nursing is a demanding job, I said when I could trust my voice again, but also a deeply rewarding one. If it is truly what you are meant to do, you will never regret answering it. Will you help me? She asked hesitantly. I mean, I know things are complicated with our family, but I would really value your guidance. You have experienced so much, know so much, that I need to learn. In that moment, looking at this young woman with her sincere eyes and determined chin, I felt something unexpected, a sense of continuation, of legacy, that had nothing to do with money or property, and everything to do with values and purpose. I would be honored to help you, I said sincerely. And Lily, thank you for coming here today. It means more than you can know. After she left, promising to return the following week to discuss nursing programs and requirements, I returned to my garden. The autumn light had changed, casting long golden patterns across the pathstones. I sipped my now cold coffee, reflecting on the strange cyclical nature of life's journey. Ben had taken everything I offered without acknowledgement, had valued my contribution only in terms of what it gave him. But his daughter, raised in privilege, educated in exclusive schools, destined for a life of ease, had somehow developed the moral clarity her father lacked. She had seen the truth and chosen to honor it, not just with words, but with action. Perhaps that was the true legacy of my life sacrifice, not the physical property I had provided, but the values I had quietly shown, values that had skipped a generation, but taken root nonetheless. As the evening light faded, I made a decision. The nursing scholarship I was establishing through the Brooklyn Blackwell Foundation would be large enough to support Lily's education completely, should she choose to accept it, not because she was Ben's daughter, but because she had shown the character and insight to recognize the truth and act on it. My phone rang the secure line that only a select few had. It was Michael Goldstein. "Ms. Wright, I hope I am not interrupting your evening. I wanted to personally inform you that the Trust's first annual review is complete, and the news is excellent. Your investments have performed better than our predictions significantly." "That is wonderful," I replied, though the financial details seemed somehow less important than they once had. "Thank you for letting me know. There is one more thing," Goldstein continued. "The Brooklyn Blackwell Foundation Selection Committee has recommended you for the position of vice chair. It is unusual for such a new board member, but your contributions to the Rural Healthcare Initiative have been particularly impactful." Pride blossomed warmly in my chest, not the empty pride of financial success, but the deeper satisfaction of meaningful contribution. "I am honored. Please tell the committee I accept." After ending the call, I remained in the garden until stars appeared in the darkening sky. 1 year ago, I had been living in Ben's guest house, measuring my worth by how useful I was to others, fearing a future of dependence and lessening. Now I sat in my own beautiful home, financially secure, professionally respected, starting a new chapter of purpose and influence. The journey had been painful, the betrayal devastating, but from that devastation had emerged a truth I might never have discovered. Otherwise, my value was inherent, not earned through sacrifice or service to others. It existed independently of Ben's recognition, independently even of Mrs. Blackwell's generous gift. I was Brooklyn Wright, not defined by my relation to anyone else, not measured by what I could give or how I could serve, but complete and worthy in myself. And that discovery, more than any inheritance, was the true fortune I had found. As night fully settled over my garden, I gathered my empty cup and the soft blanket ready to move inside. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, a board meeting to prepare for Lily's nursing goals, to support perhaps even new friendships, to nurture among my foundation colleagues. For the first time in decades, I faced the future not with worry, but with excitement. Not with fear, but with confidence. Whatever came next, I would meet it as my authentic self, a self I was still discovering, still nurturing, still learning to fully value. And that, I reflected as I closed the garden door behind me, was perhaps the greatest wealth of all.